The dinner rush had just begun when Marcus and Tasha stepped into the warmly lit restaurant. The air smelled of sizzling garlic butter, seared steak, and freshly baked bread. The soft hum of conversations blended with the clinking of glasses, and for a moment, it felt like the perfect evening. They had been looking forward to this date night all week, both of them dressed neatly. Marcus in a button-down shirt with rolled sleeves, Tasha in a simple but elegant blue dress that highlighted her easy smile. They had chosen this place carefully after hearing about its glowing reputation for excellent food and a welcoming atmosphere. The hostess at the front gave them a polite smile and quickly guided them to an empty booth near the window. They settled in, their eyes shining with anticipation as they picked up the menus. Marcus leaned forward, whispering playfully, "I think I already know what I'm getting, but I'll pretend to read the menu so I don't look predictable." Tasha chuckled softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, her laughter carrying a lightness that drew the attention of a nearby table. For a while, everything seemed normal. They talked, laughed, and even planned what dessert they might share. But then their waitress arrived. She was a woman in her late 20s, blonde hair tied back tightly, her smile practiced and professional, at least when she had been serving the tables beside them. Marcus had noticed her just moments earlier, chatting warmly with a family a few booths away, bending down to take the order of an elderly couple, her voice lilting and sweet. When she reached Marcus and Tasha's table, however, her demeanor shifted like a sudden draft of cold air. Her smile vanished, replaced by a stiff line. She barely looked at them, only glancing at the table as if it were a chore. Without greeting them, she muttered, "This section's actually about to close. You'll need to sit somewhere else, or maybe come back another time." Marcus blinked in surprise, lowering his menu. "Excuse me?" he asked, his voice calm but uncertain. The waitress sighed impatiently, as though she had repeated this countless times before. "I said this section is closing. We're short-staffed, and I won't be able to serve you here. You can wait for another table, or just leave." Tasha looked around slowly. The tables near them were filled with diners, families, couples, groups of friends, all happily being served by other staff. No one else was being asked to move. "But," Tasha started carefully, "we were just seated here by the hostess, and there are people all around us being served." The waitress's jaw tightened. She finally looked at them, her eyes sharp and defensive. "Look, I don't make the rules, okay? I just can't serve you here. That's all." The shift in her tone made Marcus's stomach sink. He glanced at Tasha, whose smile had faded, her eyes now narrowed with unease. Around them, the hum of conversation carried on, but Marcus felt suddenly exposed, as if every eye in the room was on them. Trying to keep the peace, Marcus offered, "If the section's closed, maybe you can just move us to another one?" The waitress crossed her arms. "Like I said, you can wait for another table, or leave." Her voice had risen just enough for nearby diners to notice. A man at the next table looked over curiously, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. A woman a few booths away frowned, her phone discreetly angled as if she had begun recording. Tasha straightened her back, her tone still calm but firm. "We've been seated. We're customers just like everyone else here. Why are you refusing to serve us?" The waitress rolled her eyes and muttered under her breath, "I don't have time for this." Marcus's face grew hot. He could feel anger rising in his chest, but he forced himself to keep his voice steady. He had learned the hard way that raising his tone would only make situations worse. "We're not asking for anything special. We just want to eat dinner. Is that too much?" The waitress shifted uncomfortably, but instead of softening, her voice grew sharper. "You know what? I don't need to explain myself. If you want to eat, talk to someone else. I'm not serving you." She turned as if to walk away. A hush rippled across the tables around them. The couple beside the window exchanged glances, whispering. The older man across the aisle frowned deeply. Even the family with children, once distracted by their meals, now seemed to sense that something wasn't right. Tasha's hand trembled slightly as she reached across the table, resting it on Marcus's arm. Her voice was quiet, almost breaking. "Marcus, maybe we should just go." But Marcus shook his head, his jaw clenched. "No, we shouldn't have to leave just because someone doesn't want to do their job. We belong here as much as anyone else." The waitress stopped in her tracks, half turned back toward them with narrowed eyes. Her voice was icy now, carrying enough volume to reach the tables nearby. "Fine, stay if you want. But don't expect me to waste my time on people who are just looking for trouble. A few gasps broke out from nearby diners. Phones were raised a little higher. The atmosphere, once filled with laughter and casual chatter, now felt heavy, charged with discomfort. Marcus and Tasha sat frozen for a moment, both hurt and humiliated, their special evening crumbling before it had even begun. Marcus could see the tension in Tasha's eyes, the way her lips pressed tightly together to hold back tears. His heart sank, not just for himself, but for her, for the quiet cruelty of being made to feel unwelcome in a place they had come to enjoy. Then, just as the silence between them began to stretch unbearably, a shadow fell across the booth. A man in a crisp shirt and black vest, his name tag glinting under the warm lights, stepped up to the table. His expression was calm but serious, his eyes shifting between the waitress and the couple. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his tone level but carrying authority. The waitress stiffened instantly, her posture tense. Marcus and Tasha exchanged glances, both realizing at the same time that this wasn't just another customer. It was the manager. The moment hung in the air like a held breath, every diner nearby waiting to see what would happen next. The manager's voice carried a calm authority that immediately shifted the atmosphere around the booth. Diners who had been whispering fell quiet, and even the clinking of silverware seemed to pause. Marcus felt the weight of the moment pressing down on his shoulders as he looked up at the man now standing between them and the waitress. Tasha's hand remained on his arm, steadying herself though her fingers trembled faintly. The waitress, clearly flustered, forced a strained smile. "Oh, no problem here," she said quickly, her voice suddenly sweet in a way it hadn't been a moment ago. "I was just explaining to them that this section is closing and I can't take their order right now." The manager's brow furrowed slightly. His eyes swept over the crowded section, then back to her. "Closing? During dinner rush?" His voice was cool, skeptical. The waitress shifted uneasily. "We're short-staffed. I was just trying to manage my tables. I told them they could wait for another spot, but they—" Marcus couldn't hold back anymore. His voice was low, steady, but tinged with hurt. "With all due respect, sir, that's not what happened. We were seated by the hostess like everyone else. She's serving all the tables around us, but she told us she wouldn't serve us. She didn't even want to take our order." Tasha nodded, her voice soft but firm. "We just came here to have dinner. We didn't do anything wrong. We just want to be treated fairly." The manager's eyes flicked back to the waitress. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing at first. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, broken only by the sound of someone clearing their throat at a nearby table. The waitress crossed her arms defensively. "They're exaggerating. I said I couldn't serve them right now. That's all. Maybe they misunderstood." Marcus felt his chest tighten. He could hear the faint murmurs around them, see the glow of cell phone cameras angled in their direction. People were watching, recording, waiting. He knew how easily this moment could turn, how quickly their dignity could be dismissed with a few carefully chosen words. The manager leaned slightly closer to the waitress, lowering his voice so only those nearby could hear. "Is that the story you're going with?" His tone was sharp enough to cut glass. The waitress faltered, her lips parting as though she wanted to argue, but her eyes betrayed her unease. She looked away, focusing on the floor, her cheeks flushing red. The manager straightened, his voice firm now, carrying across the room. "This couple will be served, and they will be treated with respect, just like every other customer in this restaurant." A ripple of approval moved through the nearby diners. Some nodded. Others murmured words of agreement. Tasha exhaled a shaky breath, though her hand still gripped Marcus's arm tightly. Marcus felt a flicker of relief, but it was guarded, fragile, like a flame in the wind. The waitress's face darkened, but she forced another brittle smile. "Of course," she muttered. "If that's what you want." The manager's eyes lingered on her for a long moment before turning back to Marcus and Tasha. His tone softened. "I'm sorry for what you've experienced tonight. It's unacceptable. Please allow me to take care of you personally. What can I get you to start?" For the first time since the confrontation began, Marcus felt his shoulders loosen slightly. He exchanged a glance with Tasha, who gave a small nod, her lips curving into the faintest of smiles. They began to recite their order, their voices tentative but hopeful. The manager listened carefully, jotting everything down with quiet attentiveness. As he walked away toward the kitchen, the tension at the table began to ease. Tasha leaned closer to Marcus, whispering, "Maybe it'll be okay now." Marcus nodded slowly, though a shadow of doubt remained in his eyes. "I hope so." But across the room, the waitress stood stiffly by the counter, her arms crossed, her eyes dark and resentful as she watched the manager disappear into the kitchen. Her jaw tightened, and her lips pressed into a thin line. The glow of her flushed cheeks had hardened into something sharper, colder. And though Marcus and Tasha couldn't see it, the look she cast toward them was not one of surrender. It was the look of someone unwilling to let the matter rest. The hum of the restaurant returned, laughter and conversation filling the space once more, but beneath it all lingered a current of tension, waiting for its chance to rise again. And in that uneasy calm, the question hung heavy in the air. What would the waitress do next? The restaurant's warmth returned in scattered bursts of laughter and clinking cutlery, but for Marcus and Tasha, the glow of the evening had already been tainted. They tried to focus on each other, speaking softly across the table, their voices carrying the fragile thread of normalcy. Tasha smiled faintly when Marcus cracked a gentle joke about ordering dessert before the main course, but the edge in his eyes betrayed his unease. Across the room, the waitress hovered near the counter, her arms folded tight against her chest. Her eyes flicked to the couple now and again, each glance carrying a quiet resentment. The other servers moved briskly around her, tending to their customers without a second thought, but she remained rooted in place, her bitterness palpable. When the manager returned with their drinks, Marcus noticed the waitress's stiff posture and the way she looked away sharply, as though trying to mask her disdain. The manager set the glasses down carefully, his expression calm, but his voice carried a note of reassurance meant for Marcus and Tasha alone. "Your meals will be out shortly. Thank you for your patience. And again, I apologize." Tasha gave him a grateful smile. "We appreciate it. Really." As the manager left, the couple leaned closer, whispering, "I just want this night to turn around," Tasha murmured, tracing the rim of her glass with her finger. "It will," Marcus replied, though his voice was low, weighted with caution. "We'll get through this." Their food arrived shortly after, served by the manager himself, who placed each plate with quiet precision. The aroma of roasted chicken and garlic butter drifted up, but before Marcus could take his first bite, a sharp sound cut through the hum of the restaurant. The waitress's voice. "Unbelievable," she muttered loudly enough for several nearby tables to hear. She was at the counter, speaking to another server, but her eyes darted unmistakably toward Marcus and Tasha. Some people always have to play the victim. The words hit Marcus like a slap. He froze, his fork halfway to his mouth. Tasha's hand stilled over her plate, her shoulders tightening as if bracing against another blow. Conversations at nearby tables faltered, heads turning subtly in their direction. Marcus swallowed hard, forcing himself to breathe. His instincts screamed to respond, to call her out in front of everyone, but another part of him whispered caution. He had seen moments like this spiral before. He had lived them. Tasha's voice was barely audible, but the tremor in it was unmistakable. "She's not going to stop, Marcus. She won't let this go." The couple tried to eat, but the taste of the food felt dulled by the weight of humiliation hanging in the air. Every few minutes, they caught the waitress's lingering stare, her lips pressed into a smirk or her head shaking in silent judgment. Each small act was like a stone tossed into water, rippling outward and pulling the couple deeper into discomfort. Finally, Marcus set his fork down with a quiet clink. His voice was steady, but the tension in his jaw betrayed his control. "I'm not going to let her ruin this. We came here for dinner. We're staying. We deserve to be here." Tasha nodded, her hand finding his under the table. "I'm with you." But just as they found a sliver of resolve, the manager reappeared, his steps quick, his expression darker than before. He approached the couple quietly, lowering his voice so only they could hear. "I need to ask you something. Did she say something else to you just now?" Marcus hesitated, the weight of the room pressing down on him. He glanced at Tasha, whose eyes reflected the same conflict. To stay silent meant swallowing the humiliation. To speak meant igniting another confrontation. "Yes," Marcus finally said, his tone calm but firm. "She just called us victims." Loud enough for everyone to hear. The manager's eyes hardened, his jaw tightening as his gaze flicked to where the waitress stood, now feigning busyness at the far counter. He gave a curt nod, as though a decision had crystallized in that very moment. "Thank you for telling me," he said quietly. "This ends tonight." He straightened and walked toward the counter, his stride purposeful. The couple watched as the room seemed to shift once again, diners pausing mid-bite, their attention sharpening like a lens zooming in on a critical scene. The waitress noticed his approach. Her face paled slightly, but then hardened into defiance. She dropped the menu she was holding onto the counter with a sharp snap and crossed her arms. Marcus and Tasha exchanged a look, their hearts thudding in unison. Something was about to happen, something that would decide whether this night ended in further humiliation or injustice. The manager stopped directly in front of the waitress, his voice low but edged with steel. Diners leaned in, their forks forgotten. And with that, the air in the restaurant thickened, holding everyone in suspense, waiting to hear what the manager would say or do next. The hush that fell over the restaurant was almost unnatural, as if even the clinking of cutlery and the low hum of conversations had been swallowed whole. Every eye lingered on the counter where the manager stood facing the waitress, his shoulders squared, his presence suddenly commanding the entire room. "Jessica," his voice cut through the silence, calm but resolute. "We need to talk." The waitress, Jessica, lifted her chin defiantly. "About what?" "I did my job. If they can't handle the truth, that's on them." Her words carried across the dining room like shards of glass, sharp and unapologetic. A ripple of discomfort moved through the crowd. Some diners shifted uneasily, others leaned closer, as though they couldn't look away from the unfolding drama. Marcus and Tasha sat frozen at their table, their hands still entwined under the cloth, their hearts pounding in unison. The manager's eyes narrowed. "No, Jessica, you didn't do your job. You disrespected our guests. You refused them service. And now, instead of owning up to your mistake, you're doubling down in front of everyone." Jessica scoffed, folding her arms tighter across her chest. "So what? I don't see why we have to cater to people who—" "Stop." The manager's voice rose just enough to command silence, to slice through her words before they turned into something even uglier. "This restaurant welcomes everyone. Everyone. If you can't stand by that, you don't belong here." The room went still again, but this time the air shifted, lighter, charged with a collective sense of anticipation. Diners exchanged glances, some nodding subtly, their quiet agreement spreading like a wave. Jessica's face flushed crimson, her defiance wavering under the weight of both the manager's authority and the unspoken judgment of the crowd. "You're going to take their side over mine?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "I'm going to take the side of what's right," the manager replied firmly. "Hand in your apron. You're done here." The words landed like a gavel striking down. For a moment, Jessica stood frozen, her lips parting as though to protest. But no words came. The weight of the room pressed down on her, and she finally yanked off her apron with a sharp tug, slamming it onto the counter before storming toward the door. The bell above it jingled harshly as she shoved it open and disappeared into the night. The silence she left behind lingered for only a moment before giving way to something else, applause. It started with one table near the back, then another, until a ripple of clapping and soft cheers filled the restaurant. Diners turned toward Marcus and Tasha, some smiling, others nodding in quiet solidarity. Marcus blinked, overwhelmed. He had not expected this, not the public support, not the sense of being seen rather than dismissed. Tasha's eyes glistened with tears she quickly wiped away, though her smile broke free despite her efforts to contain it. The manager returned to their table, his face calmer now, but still serious. He leaned down slightly, his voice warm but measured. "I know this doesn't erase what happened, but I hope it shows you where we stand. You are welcome here. Always." Marcus swallowed hard, his throat thick with emotion. "Thank you," he said quietly, sincerity ringing through the simple words. Tasha reached across the table and touched the manager's hand lightly. "You didn't just stand up for us. You set an example." The manager gave a small nod, his expression softening. It was the right thing to do. With that, he straightened and left them to finish their meal, his steps less heavy now, his presence carrying a quiet dignity. The rest of the evening unfolded differently. The tension had lifted, replaced by a sense of resilience and connection. Diners smiled as they passed Marcus and Tasha's table, some offering words of support, others simply acknowledging them with a look that said, "We saw what happened, and we're with you. For Marcus and Tasha, the food now tasted richer, not because of its flavor, but because of what it represented. A night that could have ended in humiliation, but instead became a turning point. They lingered over dessert, laughing softly, reclaiming the warmth that had been stolen from them earlier. When they finally stepped outside into the cool night air, Marcus paused, glancing back through the restaurant's window. The glow inside, the hum of conversations, the faces of strangers who had turned into silent allies, all of it stayed with him. He took Tasha's hand in his and squeezed gently. "We'll remember this night for the rest of our lives." Tasha smiled, her eyes reflecting both the hurt and the hope they carried. "Not for how it started," she said, her voice steady, "but for how it ended." And with that, they walked into the night together, stronger, unshaken, and no longer silent.